It's good we start with Surah Al-Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, maliki yawmiddin, iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'een, ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim, sirata alladhina an'amta alayhim ghayri al-maghdubi alayhim walad-dallin. Sadaqallahu al-aliyyul azim. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعن الله وعلى أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين آمين يا رب العالمين. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليكم منا جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار. ولا جعله الله آخر الأحد منا لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. Peace be upon you, O Aba Abdullah, and upon the souls who have gathered in your courtyard. Upon you, from us all, is the peace of God forever, for as long as we remain and as long as night and day endure. And may God never make this our last pledge to visit you. Peace be upon Husayn, and upon Ali, the son of Husayn, and upon the children of Husayn, and upon the companions of Husayn. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So 2 nights of foundation. On the first night, we recovered a word. We said martyr does not mean victim. It means witness. We returned to Abel, peace and blessings be upon him, the first witness in human history. The one our own majalis had quietly set aside, and we read his words in the Qur'an from Surah Al-Ma'idah, the chapter of the table spread, 5th chapter of the Qur'an, verse 28, where Allah says, Abel said, "If you stretch out your hand to kill me, I will not stretch out my hand to kill you. I fear God, the Lord of all creation." Just 2 sentences, a refusal and the reason for the refusal. The first act of witness in the history of the earth. On the second night, we went deeper, before Abel, before the body, before the first morning of the world. We stood at the primordial covenant, the moment the Qur'an describes in Surah Al-A'raf, the chapter of the heights, 7th chapter of the Qur'an, verse 172, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, "And when your Lord took from the children of Adam, from their loins, their descendants, and he made them bear witness over themselves, am I not your Lord? They said, yes, indeed, we bear witness. This, lest you should say on the day of resurrection, indeed we were unaware of this. Am I not your Lord? And every soul answered, yes, we bear witness." We trace the chain of the covenant through the prophets, from Abel through to Noah, Abraham, John the Baptist, Zachariah, Jesus, Hamza, as we approach the Ahlul Bayt, and of course Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, his family and righteous companions. And we saw that Karbala did not begin at Karbala. The chain of witness is older than Islam, older than all of the prophets, older than the children of Adam, older than the earth. It is the covenant God made with the soul before the body was made. Tonight we enter the Islamic theology of martyrdom itself, its definition, its categories, its precision. And we do so through the sharpest Shia theologian of the modern age on this particular subject, the martyred scholar Ayatollah Murtadha Motahhari, may God rest his pure soul. The Qur'an opens our path tonight with a verse from Surah Al-Imran, the chapter of the family of Imran, 3rd chapter of the Qur'an, verse 169, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Do not think of those slain in the way of God as dead. Rather, they are alive with their Lord being provided for." We should reflect on this verse very carefully because it is the theological spine of what we're going to be studying tonight. The Qur'an does not say, "Do not grieve for them." Rather, it says, "Do not think of them as being dead." The error the verse is correcting is not an error of emotion. It's an error of thinking, an error of category. And if we place Imam al-Husayn, peace and blessings be upon him, in the wrong category, we will mourn him wrongly. We will mourn a victim instead of honoring a witness. And that, as Shaheed Motahhari teaches us this evening, is precisely the disease that has afflicted our pulpits for generations. Shaheed Motahhari told us on the first night of these sessions that the martyrs are the candles of society. On night 2, we trace the line of candles through our prophets. Tonight, we examine the candle itself, what it's made of, why it burns the way that it does, and what distinguishes its light from every other kind of going out. Please give me a salawat and we move on to the first of the 3 sections, 5 ways to leave this world.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Shaheed Motahhari does not begin with emotion. He begins with thought. He insists, and this is one of his most important contributions to the theology of martyrdom, that we cannot mourn well if we do not think well. A preacher who cannot distinguish between kinds of death will tell the wrong story about Imam al-Husayn. A mourner who cannot make the distinction will shed tears for the wrong reason. In his book, The Martyr, he puts the question very directly. He says, the references as always are in the write-up. Shaheed Motahhari says, we must answer the question, what is meant by a martyr? And what is martyrdom? And first of all, what is meant by death? How many kinds of death are there? That question, how many kinds of death are there, is the door that we walk through tonight. And Shaheed Motahhari answers it with a taxonomy. 5 kinds of death. 5 ways a human being can leave this world. 4 of them, in the language of the Qur'an, are death. 1 of them, however, is not. So first we look at natural death. Shaheed Motahhari writes, natural death is the death in which a person reaches the end of their life and dies. The life that reaches its appointed term, what the Qur'an calls ajal, the fixed moment, and ends. It is neither a matter of pride nor is it a matter of shame. It is the ordinary conclusion of the ordinary human lifespan. The soul returns to its Lord. The body returns to the earth. The account is settled by God. No theology of witness is needed to explain a natural death. It is, as Shaheed Motahhari says, simply the way that God has made the world. Every living thing reaches its term. The second kind, which is accidental death, Shaheed Motahhari writes, deaths that are premature, before the natural term, they may occur as a result of illness or of events that befall a person. Disease, disaster, the fall that was not anyone's fault. A life ended before its natural term, prematurely. Shaheed Motahhari calls this a matter of sorrow. The community mourns, the family grieves, but there is no agency in it. No one chose it. No one willed it. It is, theologically speaking, in theological terms, a test for the survivors, a call to patience, to reliance on God, to the acceptance that our plans are not God's plans. But it is not a testimony from the one who died. The accidental death does not carry a message. It carries silence. The third kind of death, criminal death. Shaheed Motahhari writes, death where the person is the innocent victim of a crime, killed due to another's malice, hatred, or greed. It is shocking and pitiable, but because the victim had no active, voluntary choice in the matter, it is not a matter of theological pride or glory. And the references for all these quotes from Shaheed Motahhari, of course, are in the write-up. So a person unjustly killed, a victim. And here we must pause, because this is the category that must be distinguished sharply and very precisely from the fifth that we will come to momentarily. In a criminal death, a person's life is taken from them against their will. The killer bears the sin. The victim bears the injustice. But, and this is the critical point that Shaheed Motahhari insists on, the victim has not given anything. Something rather has been taken from the victim. The agency belongs to the murderer, to the killer, not to the one who has been killed. The victim's death tells us about the criminal. It does not tell us about the victim. And to call the victim a witness, to use the word shaheed for someone whose life was taken without their consent and without their choice, is to use the word incorrectly. This matters because it is the mistake our own communities have made about Imam al-Husayn, peace and blessings be upon him, unfortunately for generations. And we will return to this momentarily. But we must name what the modern world has added to this category. Forms of criminal death that our own century has tragically normalized. The unborn child whose life is ended before it had the chance to draw its first breath. An act that every Abrahamic faith has, for all of its history, understood as wrong and against the most defenseless human being imaginable. And the dying patient, the dying elderly patient, whose life is ended by what is known commonly as assisted suicide, euthanasia. It is dressed in the vocabulary of compassion, but in the judgment of every serious religious tradition, it is the collapse of the duty of care and the turning it into a convenience for the strong. Both of these are forms of criminal death. Both are in the third category. Our tradition does not look away from them, and neither will this series going forward. The fourth kind of death, self-murder. Shaheed Motahhari writes, self-murder, that a person destroys themselves. Of course, this is suicide, the reckless death of a person whose own negligence or despair ends them. Shaheed Motahhari names this as the gravest form of wasted life, because the killer and the victim are the same soul. And God has not given any of us ownership over our own lives that we can throw them away. The Qur'an is very direct about this. In Surah An-Nisa, the chapter of the women, fourth chapter of the Qur'an, verse number 29, Allah says, "Do not kill yourselves. Indeed, God is merciful with you." The life you carry was entrusted to you by God. To destroy it, whether in a single act of violence against yourself or in the slower violence of negligence, addiction, or self-abandonment, is to break a trust that we do not have the right to break. And this is the category that the modern world most frequently confuses with martyrdom. A suicide bomber is not a witness. A person who throws their life away for a cause they have not examined is not bearing a testimony. They have committed the fourth kind of death while claiming the fifth. And the community that celebrates them has compounded the tragedy. We will examine this confusion in much more detail when we get to session 9, the session that is on the counterfeits, the false claims to witness. For now, it's sufficient for us to name the line very clearly. Self-destruction is the diametric opposite of witness. And now the fifth kind, martyrdom, bearing witness with one's own life. Shaheed Motahhari writes, martyrdom is a special kind of death. Martyrdom is that a person parts with everything they have, sacrifices their life consciously, wakefully, with awareness. And here it is, the fifth kind. The one the Qur'an says is not death at all. And Shaheed Motahhari identifies its two inseparable elements with precision. Firstly, a life offered for a sacred cause. Not any cause, but a cause rooted in the covenant with God, in the worship of the One, in the defense of truth and justice as God has defined them. The cause must be sacred. If it is not, the death may be brave, it may be moving, it may be politically consequential, but it is not Shahada. It is not bearing witness to God. It is bearing witness to something less than God. And second, the offering is made consciously, with full awareness of the cost. The witness knows what is coming and he or she walks towards it. He does not stumble into it. He is not ambushed by it. He is not manipulated into it by others who care more about their own power than about his or her soul. He gives, consciously, wakefully, and with awareness. These three words in Shaheed Motahhari's Farsi, agahane, bidarane, bashu'ur, are not synonyms placed there for emphasis. They are three distinct conditions. Agahane being with knowledge, aware, the witness knows the theology. He or she knows why they are standing where they are standing. Bidarane, awake. The witness is not drugged by any ideology. They're not numbed by propaganda. They are not being emotional. They're not swept along by the crowd. Their eyes are wide open. And bashu'ur, with consciousness. The witness has thought about it, has reflected, has weighed, and has chosen. If any of these three is absent, if a person does not know why, or is not awake to what is happening, or has not consciously chosen, then the death may be tragic, it may be unjust, it may be worthy of grief, but it is not in category 5. It is not what the Qur'an means when it says, do not think of them as dead. Please give me a salawat and we move on to the next section, which is the living witness, Shaheed before the body falls.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
And over here, we must pause to say something that Shaheed Motahhari's taxonomy implies, but it doesn't say in so many words. Something our own generation has been shown so clearly that we truly have no excuse for missing it. In Surah Al-Ahzab, the chapter of the Confederates, 33rd chapter of the Qur'an, verse number 23, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, among the believers are men who have been true to their covenant with God. Among them are those who have fulfilled their pledge, and among them are those who are still waiting. And they have never changed in the least. This is the verse that was the foundation of our session on the 40th anniversary of Imam Khamenei. Think about the architecture of this verse. It names two groups within one station. Those who have fulfilled their pledge and those who are still waiting. And it seals them both with the same verdict. They have never changed. The one who has already given his life and the one who is still standing, still carrying the covenant, still walking toward the field. Both of these are witnesses. Both have been true to their covenant. The Qur'an does not wait for the body to fall before it calls them sadaqu, truthful, faithful, proven. The station is entered at the moment of the offering, not at the moment of death. If the fifth kind of death is defined by two conditions, a sacred cause and a conscious offering, then the witness does not begin at the moment of physical death. It begins at the moment of the offering. A person who has given their life to the cause of God, who walks into danger again and again and again with full knowledge and full consciousness, who carries the wounds of that choice on their body and does not turn back, that person is already a witness. They are already a shaheed. The body has not yet fallen, but the offering has already been made. The martyr, Imam Sayyid Ali Khamenei, may God rest his pure soul, understood this with a clarity that comes from having lived it. In 1981, barely 2 years after the victory of the Islamic Revolution, he was targeted in an assassination attempt. A bomb concealed in a tape recorder placed at a lectern where he was speaking in the Abu Dhar Mosque. The blast destroyed his right hand and severely damaged his right arm. He carried that wound for his remaining years. It never healed. He never regained the use of his hand. And it never changed his stance by even a single fraction of a degree. He stood where he stood, before the revolution, during the sacred defense, through the sanctions, through the threats, through every letter sent from every empire that asked for his hand or his head, and he did not change, he did not move. He was a living witness, a living shaheed, long before February of 2026. And he recognized the same station in others. Years before the martyrdom of Haj Qasim Soleimani, may God rest his pure soul, when Haj Qasim was still a living commander, still walking into the field, still coming home, Shaheed said Ali Khamenei addressed him directly and he said, and I'm quoting what Imam Khamenei said, the reference is all in the write-up. Imam Khamenei said, "You yourself, Mr. Soleimani, are a martyr in our eyes. You are a living martyr. Yes, you too are a martyr. You have attained martyrdom many times on the battlefield." And years later, visiting Kerman again, he expanded the point into a theological principle. Imam Khamenei said, "And those who went to the fronts of war and accepted the danger, who held their lives in the palms of their hands and spent all their strength, but God the Most High willed that they remain alive so that their blessings may continue for their country and for the world of Islam, Commander Soleimani too is one who gives of himself. He too is a martyr. These commanders are living martyrs on condition that they continue this path." Think about that last point. On condition that they continue this path. The station of the living martyr is not a title that is given once and kept forever. It is a station that is maintained by continuing to walk the road. The moment a person stops, the moment they compromise, turn back, trade the covenant for comfort, they have left the station. The living witness is not someone who stood at one time. The living witness is someone who is still standing. And Imam Khamenei had said, in our view, you are a martyr. Notice he uses the present tense. While the man was still breathing, still commanding, still walking into the field, and you have attained martyrdom many times. Not once, but many times. Every time Haj Qasim walked into a battlefield with the consciousness of why he was there and the knowledge of what it might cost him, he was performing the act of Shahada. The physical death on the 3rd of January 2020 was the last of many martyrdoms. It was not the first. That is why the fifth kind of death is not really about death at all. It is about the state of having given. And that state can be entered and re-entered and re-entered while the heart is still beating. And we see this in our own time, in our own cities. The men and women who have stood publicly against the genocide in Palestine, who have spoken when silence was easier, who have marched when staying home was safer, who have refused to look away when looking away was the price of comfort. Some of them are now being prosecuted by some Western governments whose positions have been shaped unmistakably by the lobbying machinery of the very regime that is responsible for and is carrying out the genocide. These people have not been killed, but they have offered something: their careers, their reputations, their legal safety, their peace of mind, consciously, wakefully, with awareness, for a cause rooted in the covenant with God. They are living witnesses, and our tradition has a word for them. It is the same word. Imam Husayn, peace and blessings be upon him, is not the third category. He is the fifth. And the difference between these 2 points is everything. When we mourn Imam al-Husayn as a victim, as a man who was unjustly killed, whose death was a tragedy inflicted on him by others, we are placing him in category 3. We are making him the same as any other innocent person killed by a tyrant. And that is not only historically inaccurate, it is, in Shaheed Motahhari's language, a betrayal of his witness. Because Imam Husayn was not killed. Imam Husayn gave. He walked towards Karbala with his eyes wide open. He told his companions on the night of Ashura, hours before the battle, that they could leave, that the enemy only wanted him, that the darkness would cover their departure and no one would blame them. And not one of them left. He prayed the noon prayer in the middle of the battlefield while arrows were falling all around him. He did not lose his life, he invested it. The difference between category 3 and category 5 is the difference between a person who has something taken from them and a person who gives something away. Between death and giving is everything. And that everything, the gap between victim and witness, is the space in which the whole theology of this series resides. And the Qur'an has told us plainly what to do with this distinction. And it said, Qur'an, Surah Al-Imran, the chapter of the family of Imran, third chapter of the Qur'an, verse 169, the verse we started with earlier. Do not think of those slain in the way of God as dead. Rather, they are alive with their Lord being provided for. Do not think of them as dead. The verse is a command, a correction of the thinking, not of the feeling. You may weep, you should weep, but do not think of them as dead, because the one who gives is not dead. The one who gives is alive, with their Lord being provided for. And if we place Imam Husayn in the third category, if we think of him as a man who was killed, we have dishonored the very verse that we recite. Please give me a loud salawat and we move on to the next point, which is the candle of society.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
So in the first two sessions, we quoted Shaheed Motahhari's candle metaphor. We quoted it briefly and we moved on. Tonight we stay with it because this metaphor is not just simple decoration. It's theological argument. Shaheed Motahhari writes, the martyrs are the candles of society. They burn themselves out and illuminate society. If they do not shed their light, no one can shine. What does a candle do? It consumes itself. The wax melts. The wick burns down. The candle does not survive the light that it gives. And yet, and this is Shaheed Motahhari's point, the candle is not the victim of its own burning. It is the purpose of its own burning. The candle was made to give light. When it gives light, it is not being destroyed. Rather, it is being fulfilled. This is what distinguishes the witness from the victim. The victim is destroyed, yet the witness is fulfilled. The victim's death is a loss to the world. The witness's death is a gift to the world. And the metaphor goes further. Look what happens in a room when the candle is lit. Other people can see, other people can read, other people can find their way. The candle did not light the room for itself. It cannot see its own light. It lit the room for everyone else. This is the martyr's prerogative, which Shaheed Motahhari names with a sentence that should stay with us for the rest of this series and beyond. He writes, we are indebted to the martyrs. They are not indebted to us. When we greet Imam al-Husayn and we say, peace be upon you, we are not doing him a favor. We are acknowledging a debt that we can never repay because he burnt so that we could see. Shaheed Motahhari writes, the martyr has irrigated society with his blood, a candle that illuminates, blood that irrigates. Two metaphors for the same reality. The witness gives so that others may grow. And the community that receives the light, that grows in the irrigated soil, owes its growth to the one who gave. This is why the theology of witness is not a theology of death. It is a theology of life. The life that comes into the world when the candle burns, the crop that rises when the blood waters the earth. Now, there is a painful honesty in the fact that the man who wrote these words, the man who gave us the theology of the candle, was himself killed for writing them. Shaheed Ayatollah Murtadha Motahhari, may God rest his pure soul, was assassinated in Tehran on the 1st of May 1979, barely 3 months after the victory of the Islamic Revolution. The group that killed him, an organization calling itself Furqan, targeted precisely the scholars who were building the intellectual foundations of the new Islamic government and society. They killed the candle maker. Shaheed Motahhari, may God rest his pure soul, had spent a lifetime maintaining in the classroom, in the mosque, in his books and on the revolutionary committees of 1978 and 79, that Islam demanded thought, not merely obedience, clarity, not merely zeal. He had insisted that the theology of martyrdom must be understood, not merely felt. He had written the very taxonomy we are studying tonight, 5 kinds of death, and the 5th is the only one that is not death, because he knew that a community which cannot tell the difference between a victim and a witness will eventually stop producing either. And for this clarity, for this insistence that the word must mean what it means, he was shot in the head on a Tehran street. And yet, and this is the theology in action, his death did not extinguish his work, rather it amplified it. The book we're studying from tonight, it's called The Martyr. It's been translated into dozens of languages. It is studied in the houses of Qom and Najaf, in universities, in seminaries, in study circles, in communities like our own, in English, in this city, on this night. The candle was extinguished, and the light went further than the candle could ever have imagined. His assassination is the proof of the theology that he wrote. The ones who killed him thought they were putting out a light. What they did was plant a seed, and the seed has grown into a mighty forest. And we are standing in that forest tonight, reading by the very light that he gave. Please give me a salawat and we move on to the next point, which is the beginning of a quest or talab.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
But a candle does not ignite itself. Before the flame there is the wick, and before the wick the restless hands that shape it. For Haj Qasim, the shaping began not with a weapon, but with a question. We've already met Haj Qasim Soleimani, may God rest his pure soul, this evening. In the words of Imam Khamenei, may God rest his pure soul, who called him a living martyr while the man was still breathing, still commanding and still walking into the field. We've seen where the road led. Now we trace where it began. Not with a battlefield, not with a command, but with a question. A restlessness, a refusal to accept that the world was as broken as it looked. In the southeast of Iran, in a province called Kerman, in the years before the Islamic Revolution, a young man was growing up in a village called Qanat Malik. His family were not scholars. His father was a farmer, a man who worked with the soil, with water, not with books. There was no library on the corner. But there was something in the young man that would not sit still, a hunger that the village could not feed and that the regime of the Shah could not explain away. He was asking questions. Why is there so much injustice? Why do the powerful get to stay powerful? Why does no one stand up? His name was Qasim. The same Qasim who Imam Khomeini would one day look at and say, you are a martyr in our eyes, you are a living martyr. But between the boy in the village and the commander who was already shaheed before the missile attack, there is a road. And tonight, on the night Shaheed Motahhari's taxonomy gives us the vocabulary for what that road produces, we ask, where does it begin? It begins long before the death itself. It begins with a question. It begins with a refusal to stop asking. The Persian mystical tradition, the tradition that Shaheed Motahhari was steeped in, and that runs like an underground river throughout the whole of Shi'i thought, calls this first stage talab, the quest. The great Sheikh Farid ad-Din Attar of Naishapur, the 13th century poet and mystic who gave the Persian-speaking world one of its most alluring allegories of the soul's journey towards God, names it in his masterwork, The Conference of the Birds, as the first of 7 valleys the soul must cross before it reaches its Lord. Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi, the well-known Rumi, the poet-scholar of Konya, whose Masnavi has been called the Qur'an in the Persian tongue, and who drew his deepest inspiration from the teachings of Ahlul Bayt, peace and blessings be upon them all, names the same restlessness in his own way. It is the soul that wakes up and cannot go back to sleep. It is Abel refusing to raise his hand, not because someone taught him not to, but because something inside him already knew. It is the fitrah, the covenant we traced on the second session, stirring in the chest. We will return to Haj Qasim. His story will walk through the series and the stages the Persian mystics mapped. Talab, the quest tonight, then love, then knowledge, then witness. But tonight the lesson of Talab, or the quest, is simply this. The candle does not begin to burn on the day that it's lit. The wax was already forming. The wick was already being wound. And for Haj Qasim, as for Imam Husayn, as for Abel, the giving began long before the giving was visible. Please give me a loud salawat and we move to the third and final point, the failure of the storytelling preacher.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
So the taxonomy stands. 5 kinds of death, and the 5th is a gift, not a loss. And this brings us, with the full weight of the categories behind this, back to the critique we introduced in the first session. The critique that holds this entire series accountable. The critique that Shaheed Motahhari leveled at his own community, at his own preachers, at his own tradition, not because he didn't love them, but because he loved the truth more. Shaheed Motahhari writes, and the references are all in the write-up. Most of the preachers who narrate the story of Karbala call Imam Husayn the master of martyrs, and yet they have little analytical insight into the question of martyrdom. They describe the events in such a way as though Imam al-Husayn lost his life in vain for nothing. Now we can hear this with the categories in front of us. What Shaheed Motahhari is saying is that these preachers, well-intentioned, often sincere, sometimes deeply moved by what they're telling, are describing a category 5 death as though it were a category 3. They are describing a gift as though it were a theft. They are describing the candle as though it had been accidentally knocked over and crushed. And the effect on the congregation is devastating. When the story is told as a tragedy inflicted upon Imam al-Husayn, rather than as a witness offered by Imam al-Husayn, the congregation mourns a victim. They feel sorrow. They feel anger at the injustice. But, and this is the important point, but they do not feel the obligation. Because the victim does not place an obligation upon you. A victim only places an obligation on the one who victimized the victim. But a witness who is given, places an obligation on everyone who receives the light. If you sit in a room that a candle has lit, you owe the candle. If you walk in a world that Imam Husayn's witness has illuminated, you owe Imam al-Husayn. And drawing from Shaheed Motahhari's critique, let us name 3 common errors, 3 ways the story is told wrongly, so that we can avoid them for the rest of this Muharram. The first error, reducing Imam Husayn to his suffering. The preacher who spends 40 minutes on the thirst, on the arrows, on the heat, on the blood, on the cries of the children, and 2 minutes on why Imam Husayn went to Karbala in the first place, this is a category 3 error. The narration centers the crime committed against Imam al-Husayn, not the testimony that Imam Husayn came to give. The result is a congregation that feels sadness, certainly, but does not know what this sadness is for. The suffering is real. The thirst was real. The arrows were real. The cries of the children were real. We do not deny any of it. And we will stand in the middle of it on the 10th night. But when the suffering becomes the whole of the story, we have lost the story. The suffering was the cost of the testimony. It was not the testimony itself. The testimony was the 12 words spoken in a hall in Medina. The words we will hear in tonight's maqtal. And everything after those words was the world's response to a man who would not be moved. Of course, the words were, someone like me cannot pay allegiance to someone like him. The second era, marking the mourning at the end. The preacher who treats the tears as the destination. Shaheed Motahhari, may God rest his pure soul, was very explicit. The tears are sacred, but they are not the destination. They are the door. Shaheed Motahhari writes, and again, the references are all in the write-up. Shaheed Motahhari says, although Islam does not look favorably upon weeping for an ordinary deceased person, it desires that people weep for the martyr, because the martyr has created an epic, and weeping for the martyr means participating in his epic, harmonizing with his spirit, affirming his zeal, and moving with the wave he has set in motion. That last phrase again, moving with the wave he, the martyr, has set in motion. The tears are not the end. They are the entry into the wave. They are what carries you forward into the epic the martyr created, into the spirit the martyr left behind. But if the tears stop at the door, if the mourning never becomes movement, then we have wept without entering the wave. And a wave that no one else enters breaks on an empty shore. The Prophet Muhammad himself, peace and blessings be upon him, his family and righteous companions, wept for Imam Husayn before Imam Husayn was born, much as we traced in the previous session, the second session. The tears are prophetically endorsed, but the door they open leads to a question. And that question is, now that you have wept, what will you do? If the answer is nothing, I have wept and I will weep again next year, then the mourning has not completed its circuit. It has stayed at the door. And a door that stays shut is effectively a wall. The martyr Imam Khamenei, may God rest his pure soul, taught this for decades. He identified 3 elements in the movement of Imam al-Husayn and insisted that all 3 must be present in any gathering that claims to honor him. Imam Khamenei said, there are 3 elements in the movement of Abu Abdullah, peace and blessings be upon him. Abu Abdullah, of course, being Imam Husayn. The element of logic and intellect, the element of epic and honor, and the element of emotion. Merely paying attention to emotion and forgetting about the aspect of logic and intellect that is embedded in the event of Imam al-Husayn is a belittlement of the event. The mourning gatherings for Imam Husayn the mourning gathering for Imam Husayn is a gathering that must be a source of understanding and awareness, what we call ma'rifah. The reference, of course, is in the write-up. 3 elements: logic, epic, and emotion. Not 1, not 2, 3. And the mourning gathering, the majlis, must be a source of ma'rifah, of understanding. He called this tabyin, clarification, and it was the subject of our entire Ashura series last year. The tears without understanding are an act of sympathy. The tears with understanding are an act of worship. Both are human, but only the second is Shahada, is witness. Only the second is a continuation of the chain. And the third era, disconnecting Karbala from the rest of the year. The preacher who makes Muharram an island, 10 nights of intensity, and then silence until next year. But if Imam Husayn's witness is category 5, if it is a conscious, ongoing gift to the world, then the lights do not turn off on the 11th of Muharram. The candle does not burn for 10 days and then go out. It burns permanently. The obligation it places on the living is permanent. The preacher who packs Karbala away on the shelf until next Muharram, or until Shahr Ramadan or anything like this, has reduced the candle to a seasonal decoration. Something we bring out once a year, we admire, we weep over, and then we box again and put away. The great exegete, jurist, teacher and scholar Ayatollah Jawadi-Amoli, may God protect him, has taught, in his seminal work, Hamase va Irfan, Epic and Mysticism, and in his lecture series titled The Blooming of Intellect in the Light of the Husayni Movement, that Karbala is not a historical event confined to the past. It is an ontological and existential reality. His own words. He says, and the references are in the write-up, Ashura is not merely a historical event confined to the past. It is a continuous ontological and existential reality. And in his well-known commentary, Tafsir Tasneem, he takes the point further. He says, if one lacks that elevated vision and thinks in fragmented, localized terms, one asks, why did Karbala happen? Why this severe tragedy? But if you perceive the expanse of absolute mercy and supreme divine wisdom, you see that Karbala in its proper place is haqq, truth or reality. Karbala in its place, indeed God willed to see you slain, is haqq. To us it is bitter, but within the total cosmic system, it is truth. Haqq, truth, reality. Not a tragedy that happened once and khalas, ended. A truth embedded in the structure of existence, bitter to us, but haqq in the total system God has made. And if it is haqq, if it is a permanent ontological woven into the fabric of creation, then it cannot be confined to just 10 nights of a year. The same choice, the choice Imam Husayn made, is always being made by someone, somewhere, in some form. And every time we reduce it to a once-a-year commemoration, we have denied what the Qur'an has told us plainly. Again, Qur'an, Surah Al-Imran, the chapter of the family of Imran, third chapter of the Qur'an, verse 169. Do not think of those slain in the way of God as dead. Rather, they are alive with their Lord being provided for. They are alive with their Lord. Not were alive once in the past, are alive. Present tense, now. So if we have heard Shaheed Motahhari correctly tonight, if the taxonomy has done its work, then we walk out of this hall, this call, this discussion, carrying something we did not carry in. We carry a test. 2 questions that we can apply to every death we hear called martyrdom, every claim to witness, every use of the word shaheed. Was the cause sacred, rooted in the covenant with God? And was the choice conscious, made with full awareness of the cost? If the answer to both is yes, we are looking at the 5th kind of death, which is the real life. We are looking at the candle. If the answer to either is no, we are looking at something else. Something that may well be tragic, may be honorable, may be deeply moving, but is not what the Qur'an means when it says, do not think of them as dead. We will apply this test in full when we come to session 9, God willing, the session on the counterfeits, the false witness claims, the false claims to witness. For now, let us carry it, and we carry one more thing. The knowledge that the 5th kind of death has already begun in the life that precedes it. The candle was being formed before it was lit. The wax was being poured, the wick was being wound. In Abel, it was the fitrah that refused to raise a hand. In the young Qasim from Kirman, it is the question that would not stop being asked. And in Imam Husayn, in the night of Medina, the walk to the governor's hall, the 12 words spoken quietly across a lamplit table. Tonight, we hear those 12 words, not in the battlefield, not yet. In a hall, in a city, at night. Please give me a loud salawat and we segue across to the maqta.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
So now we have a supplication and then we finish. So, peace be upon Abel who testified first. Peace be upon the prophets who carried the covenant and wept. Peace be upon Shaheed Motahhari who gave us the light to see by. Peace be upon Husayn who gave. Peace be upon the Imam of our age, who remembers. Peace be upon you all, upon your houses, upon the candle that burns tonight, the candle that is not a fate, but a gift, and that will not be put out. O God, you told us, do not think of them as dead. You who made the fifth kind of death, the only one that is not death at all. You who created the candle and the wick and the match and the room, and who created the night so that the candle would have something to illuminate. We turn to you tonight on this third night of Muharram. And we have no Lord except you, and no refuge except at your door, and no teacher but the ones you sent to teach us. O God, we send our condolences and our congratulations tonight to your beloved Prophet. Peace and blessings be upon him, his family and righteous companions. Condolences for a grandson who would walk out of his city before dawn, who would stand at his grandfather's grave, weep and say goodbye, who would leave the streets his grandfather had walked and never return to them. And congratulations for a grandson who, when the letter came and the demand was made, did not hesitate for the time it takes to draw a breath. He said 12 words and walked out. And the road that began that night has never reached its end, because the one who walked it is alive with his Lord being provided for. And the road he opened is still open, and we are walking it tonight. O God, we send our peace and blessings to the martyred scholar Shaheed Ayatollah Murtadha Motahhari, the teacher who gave us the taxonomy, who sat in a classroom and said, how many kinds of death are there? And who would not let his students go home until they could answer, who loved the truth more than he loved the approval of the crowd, who was shot on a street in Tehran for the crime of clarity, and whose blood irrigated the very ground we are standing upon tonight. His candle was extinguished by the hand of a criminal. His light is brighter now than it was on the day that he was killed. We see by it tonight. We will see by it, God willing, tomorrow. And the ones who put it out are forgotten. But the books they tried to silence are in our hands, and we are reading them aloud. O God, we send our peace and blessings to Imam al-Husayn, the one who stood in the hall of Walid and spoke 12 words that contain the whole of the religion. Someone like me does not give allegiance to someone like him. The one who walked out of the city of his grandfather with the sword of God under his cloak. The one who left his mother's house, his grandfather's grave, the streets that knew his name, and did not look back, because the road ahead was the road you had laid, and the witness ahead was the witness you had asked for, and the candle was already lit. O God, O God, we send our peace and blessings to the women of his house, who heard the answer that night and did not object. Not one. Our Lady, said Zainab, peace and blessings be upon her, who knew what the road would cost, and she chose the road. To Our Lady, said Sakina, and to Our Lady, said Ruqayya, to the wives, the sisters and the daughters, who packed what could be packed and left what could not be left, and what could not be left, and walked into the night beside the one who said what needed to be said. Their silence that night was its own kind of testimony, and we greet it. O God, we send our peace to the young man from Kerman, Haj Qasim Sulaimani. May you, O our Lord, rest his pure soul, who began with talab, with the quest, with the questions that would not stop asking. The farmer's son from a village with no library, who looked at the world and said, this is not right, this is not what God made, this can be changed. The candle was already forming in him before anyone knew it was a candle. The wax was already being poured, and the road that he would walk from Kerman to Karbala, from the quest to the witness, is the same road Imam Husayn walked out of in Medina. He did not know it yet, but the fitrah knew, the covenant knew. And you, O God, who placed the covenant in every soul before the body was made, you knew. O God, we send our peace and salutations and blessings to the martyr Imam Sayyid Ali Khamenei, who said the 12 words in the tongue of February in the rooms of an empire that thought itself permanent, to the Yazids of his century who thought themselves untouchable, and was paid the price that Imam al-Husayn was paid. The sentence is one sentence. The refusal is one refusal. And between the two mouths that spoke it, the mouth in Medina and the mouth in Tehran, stand 14 centuries. And a chain of witnesses so long that the pen cannot write every name on the roll, though the one behind the veil knows every single one. O God, we send our peace, blessings and salutations to the Imam of our age. May our souls be his sacrifice, and may you, our beloved Lord, hasten his return. Our Imam, who carries every candle, who remembers every wick, who knows the taxonomy better than any teacher, because he is the living proof of the fifth kind of death, the one who has not died because the witness is not yet finished, because the chain is still being forged, and the permission has not yet been given, and the 313 have not yet gathered at the threshold. O God, accept from us this third night. We come to you with a word that had begun to mean something. Tonight, you have given it a taxonomy through Shaheed Motahhari. 5 kinds of death, and only one of them is alive. We ask you to keep the test in our hands. Sacred cause, conscious choice, over the 7 nights of the remaining Ashura sessions, through the break, through the 5 nights of Safar until Arba'een, so that went through all of our lives, so that when we stand at the grave of your proof on the 40th day, we stand as informed mourners, not as uninstructed ones, as witnesses, not spectators. O God, you are the one who made the candle and the night. You are the one who asked every soul, am I not your Lord? You are the one who said, do not think of them as dead. We are trying to obey. We are trying not to think of them as dead. We are trying to think of them as alive, alive with you being provided for, burning still, giving light still, illuminating the very room we're sitting in right now. Help us to see by their light, and do not let us set the candle down. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. We are from God, and to him is the return. And we repeat your promise, an eternal promise for justice and a warning for the wrongdoers. وَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مُنْقَلَبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ. And the wrongdoers will soon know what goal they will end up, at what goal they will end up. And from the depths of everything that we have learnt tonight, we say, Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakil. God is sufficient for us, and he is the best of guardians. Amen, O Lord, sustainer of the universes. Amen, O most merciful of the merciful. Wa akhiru da'wani alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.